Hi, everybody. This is Raina Terrell, and this is how Raina Terrell sees it. I am here with the students from UCLA, UC Irvine, and Pomona College, and we are here to talk about hybrid access for students with disabilities and who are immunocompromised. So the first question I want to ask you guys, thank you, first and foremost, thank you guys for being here this evening. Thank you guys for joining me. I just wanted to ask, what is the Disabled Student Union at UCLA?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So my name's Christopher. I'm a member of the Disabled Student Union at UCLA. We're a pretty new organization. We're about 2 years old. Our birthday's coming up in March. And we're basically a collection of disabled, chronically ill, mentally ill, neurodivergent, immunocompromised, et cetera, students and non-disabled allies. And we're very community focused. It's basically building community on campus and using our love for that community to advocate for our rights and our access needs on campus. So I know Hannah and Eliana are also from the DSU, if you two want to add anything as well, but that's the main gist.
Can you guys just briefly tell a bit about yourselves and basically what your personal goals are?
Do you mean like in our personal lives or personal goals as to what?
Personal goals as far as your education in UCLA and UC Irvine and Pomona.
Sure. So I'm Christopher Ikonomou. I use he, him pronouns. I'm currently a third-year undergraduate student studying communications and disability studies. I'm not sure what I want to do yet, but I do know that I want the disability community to be the forefront of whatever career I end up in. Hopefully, maybe in the entertainment industry with representation of disabled bodies, being a writer or in production, or on social media, making social media and websites more accessible. So I know disability will be somewhere in my future.
I'm Mibby. I use they, them pronouns. I am, again, a non-traditional student. I'm not entirely sure what year I'm in. I'm a sociology major, film minor, also highly interested in becoming a TV writer with an emphasis in representation of every kind. And academically, my goals at this point are just to graduate.
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm Johnny, pronouns he, him. As for my future, honestly, I'm not sure yet, but this experience and this pandemic and seeing all of these disabled students standing up and fighting for what's right has inspired me to maybe, especially in my future, whatever I do, think about accessibility and think about disability with whatever career I choose.
I'll also jump in. So hello there, my name is Frank. I use he and pronouns, and I'm currently a first-year political science major, here in UC Irvine. And I would say that a major goal for me in life is that I would like to, use my major to at least pursue public office. Specifically, I would like to one day maybe go into Congress, because I feel that the voices of the disabled cannot be ignored any longer. But at least we need to have representation within our government, that we need to have at least have an outlet to at least make sure that the concerns of disabled, will not go ignored, and that there at least to be an opportunity for legislation passed to at least make sure that instances like this never happen again, that this will be the last time that this will happen again, that this is the end of an era, and that this will be the beginning of a new era. And I feel like I've just already preempted my own campaign announcement for, I don't know, maybe 2028. I don't know, vote Frank Granda for Congress or something. I got nothing. Thank you.
Eliana and Hannah.
I'll go first. I'm Hannah. I use they, she, or really any all pronouns. I am a 6-year graduate student in chemistry, and I have nowhere near as lofty goals as everyone else here. I'm looking into getting a job in a national research lab or in industry, in part because it should hopefully give me the flexibility to spend time furthering community activism goals with both the disability and the LGBT community as members. I kind of feel like best ally on certain things. but and then with Black, Latinx, Indigenous and other POC communities as an ally. So yeah, I'm getting out of the academic grind. I do not have the spoons to change it from the inside, and I'm really proud of all the undergrads here. And what I do want to say to the university is, I think you don't understand how much more you have coming down the line. And as grad students, also we need to fight not only for the undergrads, but for ourselves, so that more people who care like me and stuff don't end up leaving because of the toxic work environment.
Eliana?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So hi, I'm Eliana Sisman. She, her, hers. I'm a second year at UCLA. Major is International Development Studies. I'm looking at professionally being a lawyer working on disability rights and other issues of human rights and justice. And my goals in my education are to get a decent understanding of all these structures we live in and how they can actually function and work for people for once, and also to be a good citizen of this community and make it a bit help work with all these amazing people, make it a bit better. So my thank you. Thanks, Frank. And your campaign is already endorsed by me. So
Why, thank you. And also, Elena, if you're willing, to at least work for disability rights, if I ever get elected, I could possibly reach out to you. I mean, I could have a disability consultant within my staff.
I would love that. Appreciate the offer. Definitely down for that. Very cool. Thank you. That'd be great. And yes, any political candidates watching this, take a lesson from Frank. Have a disability consultant on your staff. So, yeah. Anyhow, my message to the administration would be, if any of you somehow manage to think this is about to go away, it is not. And I think a lot of people who might not have been thinking much, either students who weren't thinking much about disability or students who had disabilities who had maybe in the past had a hard time seeing how these things could change. I think a lot of people, such as myself, have really come to get to a point where, first of all, the status quo is not acceptable, and secondly, we actually realize we have the capability to change this. So we're not going away. We're not getting intimidated. You tried that. It did not work. When y'all were saying you were going to have the police come and arrest us, and probably a lot of people are like, well, I am definitely saying then, because no, that is not how this works. I did not. But you're not looking to go around and have intimidation and have that become the norm in this community. So that is not going to work. And also, why did you get into this? Presumably, most of you got into this because you got your education. So try and remember that and try and think less about the whatever it is that makes it difficult for you to do these accessibility, and think more about the value of having your students not drop out, not be delayed in graduation, not be stressed and distracted from learning. And I also want to say to faculty that, first of all, we have a lot of similar issues. I think the academic senate, which literally came out and said, if you're immunocompromised, that's not a good enough reason. If your family members are immunocompromised, let me correct myself. They said, if your family members are immunocompromised, that's not a good enough reason for you to be teaching all your classes remotely, even though if you're going in person, you could get COVID and bring it, God forbid, to your family member who is immunocompromised. So they are not worrying much about your families either. And also, I know most of you and faculty also got into this because you care about education. So again, the fact that students, now that students are being delayed and being frightened and being distracted not having less energy for learning and being at risk of dropping out because of this, you can see that your mission and the people you care about are under attack. So try and offer a hybrid personally, and try and advocate within whatever influence you have. And I think together we can change this.
So how was life for you on campus before the global crisis?
I can, I guess, take this one as well. So I'm physically disabled. I'm not personally immunocompromised. And unfortunately, I actually started identifying as disabled when I came to UCLA. I've been chronically ill my whole life. I was diagnosed when I was very young, and the physical inaccessibility of UCLA's campus disabled me, basically. That's under the social model of disability, where it's the circumstances that led to me feeling disabled rather than my impairment itself. And that, alongside there were no disabled clubs on campus in my freshman year. This was before the DSU was founded. It was really isolating, and it was really difficult being disabled on campus, especially when there were minimal resources for building community and finding people like yourself. And I went my whole freshman year until the pandemic hit, kind of in that loneliness. And I was very lucky to find the Disabled Student Union, who originated during the pandemic.
So did you, before the pandemic started, did you happen to fight for any kind of accessibility because of your disability, or?
There wasn't really like an infrastructure in place for us to do that before the Disabled Student Union was founded. That was part of the reason why it was founded. One, because it was very difficult for disabled students to know that we existed outside of just ourselves. And since we were created in the very first month of the pandemic, that's kind of when our advocacy started. And luckily that's when online access, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, made organizing a little easier, because we could just pop on a Zoom room instead of having to meet in person and stuff like that. So our advocacy really began during the pandemic, I would say.
Great. And when the advocacy began before the, during the pandemic, how many students joined? How did it grow? How did your Disabled Student Union grow?
I would say for the first year during the pandemic, through like the 20 to 2021 school year, I think we had about 20 to 40 consistent members. We just have our official organization. Really, we don't really have a structure at like many organizations do on campus. It's really just once you're in the group chat, you're in, and you can count yourself as a part of the Disabled Student Union. So it was really a collection of like a few dozen students who happened to find the Disabled Student Union, whether that be through the disability studies minor or a professor who knew about it. That's how I learned about it. And it was kind of just happenstance knowing each other until in like June of 2021, we gained some notoriety because we really started to advocate for disabled students' rights. We started with advocacy about priority enrollment. Long story short, the Academic Senate tried to decrease our ability to enroll in classes. Priority enrollment is basically being able to do it before other students so that we can account for our access needs, if we are only available with transportation for certain hours of the day or energy levels, stuff like that. And they cut it out of nowhere. And that was our first advocacy that was luckily successful in the past couple months. And that was kind of when we started to blow up. We started using our social media a lot more. We put our group chat in our bio, so anyone who was interested at UCLA could join, and it kind of went from there. And luckily, the growth we got from social media really helped in growing our organization to now today, we have maybe 100, 150 really committed students who are a part of the organization.
And what safety measures did I wanted to talk more about the hybrid access to learning. What safety measures did the university put in place when the global crisis was at its worst?
I've been speaking a lot, so if Hannah or Eliana, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, I probably am maybe the best to take this question. I'm actually a graduate student, so I have been basically at UCLA since besides a few trips since like March of 2020. So at the very beginning, almost no one, like you basically, unless you are a group that was directly studying what was going on, you could only have like a few members at campus at a time. And everyone else would be remote. Then it like moved to limited in research set. And this is for people who like their research or, well, pretty much their research. Their research or their job required them to be in person. Basically everything else got shuttled off to remote. Then it moved to, you had a limited number of people. This was probably around June of 2020. I did not give you a proper timeline, but like probably around June of 2020 or so, it was then like you could be only at a certain occupancy in your, at least in your research group on campus at a time. And it sort of slowly built up from there to higher levels of occupancy until like full occupancy, even before students returned in September of 2021. And this is with monitoring surveys with like weekly screenings, et cetera. And again, sorry, I don't have a perfect timeline of how all of these things happen, but essentially for a while it was that. And then I don't know about everyone else, but being on campus with the, when not this latest surge, but the one prior happened, I was like, how are they going to bring students back? And it was kind of scary when they did, especially as at this point I hadn't been teaching. So I was like, I don't want another surge to shut things down. Like, I'm sorry, I want to graduate and like I need to be on campus to graduate. So not to sound super selfish, but I ended up finding out about the DSU probably somewhere between June, in that June surge, like that June surge. And it was really, I think, helpful for me to kind of have a community space for like some of these anxieties around things.
I know at least in that fall period, like fall 2021, at least from an undergraduate perspective, people who lived on the Hill, which is like the dorms, had to test once a week, I believe. It was mandatory once a week, recommended twice a week. And people who were off the Hill, which is like apartments, off-campus apartments, stuff like that, they didn't have any requirements. They did have to fill out a symptom monitoring survey, which is basically showing you don't have any of the symptoms of COVID, but they weren't really checked anywhere. I didn't have any classes where like the professors have access to who has done the survey, what their results are, and I didn't have a single class that actually asked for them to let you into the classroom. So although technically masks were required and those symptom surveys were required and testing was required to some extent, there was very little enforcement of those rules, unfortunately. And in this past Omicron surge for winter quarter, they started making people who were off campus test weekly, but the way that they enforce it is the honor system, basically. Like they know if you've had a positive test result or a negative test result, but if you haven't had a test in a while, you can just say you're waiting for a COVID test and just not take it for several weeks and they won't check up on you. So unfortunately, things are here, but they're not being enforced.
Sorry for interrupting, which I fundamentally don't understand, because at one point I ended up being, because I usually take my test on Monday, and with President's Day weekend, I ended up taking it on Tuesday. And it's like, you fill it out in the system. They should know if you already have a test, you're waiting for a result, but they don't. And I find that in a sense wild, but not fully the point. Which it was good for me because I got to like go to like, there are a few places that check, and being 100%, I usually only fill it out if I'm going to places where they check. So I fill it out on the days I go to the gym. I don't fill it out when I go into work because no one checks fundamentally. And it's just, yeah, it feels really, and also when you have enough little chronic things, it's like, it's like, is this or is this not? And at a certain point, you kind of need to be like, it's like, it's never been it. So like, take the anxiety level down. Fingers crossed.
What do you think the university can do as far as providing better safety measures, for one, during this global crisis, and for two, making sure that you all can have better access to education, better access to your classes?
I would say from the UCLA side is checking those monitoring surveys for one. Like if a student has not filled it out or has filled it out and has not been cleared for campus, they should not be going to class. And of course, the main thing that could prevent students from, having that fear of going to class, because of course they're not going to be able to enforce 100% of the time, is allowing us to access recordings of class or allow us to accessing live streams of class so that we can be there while not being there in person. And that's really the number one thing that I'm sure we're all going to get into, but UCLA has the power and the money to invest in all of these solutions that will make sure that not only disabled students, but anyone who for any reason cannot attend class can be safe and can still access that education. Really prioritizing that, I feel, is going to be the best solution. It's going to improve higher education for everyone, and it's going to make sure that accessibility is prioritized within higher education.
Great. So can you all tell me, why did you all join this movement?
I can start with that one. So I'm a non-traditional student. I'm 25 years old. I've been at UCLA for 5+ years. I don't know what year I am. I've been like grappling with our Center for Accessible Education for years, trying to get accommodations due to my disabilities, and I still don't have them. So when the pandemic rolled around and they automatically jumped to online instruction, my grades were higher than they had ever been. I had no issues with online school. And at that point, that was when I kind of said, okay, well, maybe I don't need these accommodations because I'm essentially already getting them now. But then when we went back to in-person instruction, I'm like, okay, they're not giving us options to continue with online instruction. There's no hybrid options. And so that was incredibly frustrating. My grades started dropping again. And when I found out that there was this movement, I knew I had to be a part of it because I'm like, this is ridiculous, not just for me, but I'm sure there are other students who have similar situations. But for me, it just kind of hit this tipping point where I'm like, I have to do something about this because this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I'm from Pomona College, which is one of the colleges of the Claremont consortium, just like about 45 minutes away from UCLA. And last semester, I was dealing with some health problems, and I was also dealing with, newly registering with the accommodations office. And this was like last semester was really the first time I ever super identified as being disabled. But throughout that entire time, one thing that really helped me move forward and helped me keep going was actually seeing the Disabled Student Union of UCLA standing up for hybrid learning and standing up for accessible education. And the thing that really pushed me over the edge was not only how I was feeling about coronavirus, but hearing the stories of other students who are scared to become more disabled, who don't want to become more chronically ill, who want to protect their parents or their family members and don't want to take any risk to a virus that could potentially change the course of your life. That's why I would say I started really getting involved with the disabled student group at the 5Cs and helped and following in UCLA's footsteps, trying to advocate for stuff like that here on the Claremont College's campus.
And I would say that the reason you see why I got myself involved was that Well, you see, for a while, I have been a bit outraged, basically on how the university, the university, essentially just put, the COVID restrictions were basically in flux. Like there was a sense of inconsistency. There was an issue in Irvine that essentially, like there is a lack of, how do you call, enforcement, or at least there are different levels of enforcement on where essentially, which rules, get enforced and which rules don't get enforced. And then basically all of a sudden, we basically decided that during winter quarter, because, as a first year, I mainly come here, when we were basically coming out of a post-pandemic world. So during fall quarter, I'm mainly referring to is that it was a sense of influx. There was a bit of inconsistencies in enforcement over COVID restrictions, which was a bit of risk for students, such as myself, who are basically just trying to live our lives without trying to risk about getting, COVID. And then when winter quarter came, it got interesting because first, basically, we got ourselves, in order to, because due to the rise of Omicron, to basically stay away from the university and basically, stay home for at least 2 weeks. But after that, it basically got extended to 4 weeks. And then it basically got us a bit interesting because then the university then decided to send a message that essentially stated that, oh, hey, you guys can go back into campus now. It's safe. Oh, and that student government was consulted. The issue is that the student government was never consulted about this issue. They were not aware that, that the admin basically decided to reopen campus without their permission. And that was the moment that basically made me, push the line. And so I basically, discovered that there was, a group here in Irvine that basically committed to similar efforts that you're seeing at UCLA and also at the Claremont colleges. And it also made me realize something that, hey, I'm basically onto something, that this could be the start of a much larger movement. And I realized that if essentially, because in this movement, there are going to be major big players in this game. And I realized that Irvine essentially has the opportunity to become a much larger player in this movement if everything goes successful. And so I realized that if I want to at least commit to the fight, I have to commit as much as possible. And so that is mainly why I want to at least commit to movement, not only, to at least, help the students out here in UCI, but to also make sure that if UCI strikes early and that we're able to at least come at the right time, we can at least become one of the major players of this growing movement that you're seeing all over the country.
Okay, so you are not pleased with the measures that have been taken in place with the pandemic. So I just want to get to more people. If more people want to say, if they want to say why they have joined the Disabled Student Union and this movement for hybrid learning. Is there anyone else who wants to chime in?
I'll chime in, following from Frank's statement as like a fellow UCA student, kind of backtrack. I'm a disabled student who's been discriminated and my own accommodations were mistreated before the pandemic happened. So I already have a huge grief regarding being disabled and being on a campus, as well as I work at a retention center. So I know the complexities of the importance of having a virtual space to learn, and the just kind of the automatic change will impact the students that I see at this retention center on campus. Though I don't identify as immune compromised, I know a lot of people I love and care about are going to be hugely affected by, I guess, continuing to be on campus. So that's like two reasons to join this movement is to, one, support other people in the disabled community who are going to be hugely impacted by returning back to campus, as well as just kind of grieving, just addressing the own ableism that has been happening before the pandemic has been or just started.
And I guess I can add on like a specific answer to this question. So like I stated earlier, I'm physically disabled. I'm not particularly more affected by the pandemic than my immunocompromised peers. I have a chronic illness, but it doesn't make me more susceptible to the global crisis. What really made me passionate about this is I have that privilege to not be extra affected by what's going on, and I want to use that to make sure my community is cared for. And actually, we had a protest in October of 2021 with this issue, and it was probably one of the first hybrid protests ever. We had about 100 demonstrators on Zoom doing all sorts of things on the internet to boost our voices, and we had about 80 people in person, along with some really prevalent speakers. Rosemary Garland Thompson, who's a disability justice scholar, Oscar-nominated filmmaker Jim Lebrecht, who made Crip Camp, and dancer and disability advocate Leroy F. Moore, who's also goes to UCLA as a grad student. And unfortunately, after that amazing show of solidarity and disability power and student power, the administration really blew us off. And as disabled students, we became exhausted, basically, like being strung out, not being told any concrete compromises to what we were asking for, you know, it taking months or like 4 weeks at the minimum for the COVID Response and Recovery Task Force to get back to us, or administration to get back to us. And a week before we were set to go back in person in this year, after that 4-week online stint that Frank mentioned, we were reached out to by our student body president, Breeze Velasquez. She's fantastic. She reached out to us and was like, I want to make sure that this happens. I want to support you the best that we can. And the chair of the African Student Union, who is a part of the Mother Organizations Coalition, her name's Simone Anderson, she suggested to the 10 mother organizations, which are student organizations for underrepresented groups on campus, mostly racial and ethnic minorities, but also the Queer Alliance, and was like, hey, we've been fighting for safety, access, and retention in different ways for our communities for decades on UCLA's campus. Let's join forces. So the reason that I felt so passionate and was a core organizer of the movement at UCLA and felt empowered to do it was because it was such a beautiful moment of community solidarity across so many lines outside of just disability, and seeing that there were so many people who cared about us, and it wasn't just us kind of floundering in this ocean of UCLA bureaucracy alone. That really gave us the power to do what we've been doing and sit in a building on campus for 16 days until we got at least some of what we're asking for. So I started in this movement because I really wanted to care for my community, and I felt that this was really the best way to do it and the best time to do it.
That was going to lead to my next question, definitely. How important is it for you to unite with Black students and students of color, as well as the Mother Organizations Coalition, which houses all of these organizations? How important is intersectionality being included in your cause?
It really was the key. There have been a lot of critiques of the Disabled Student Union and disabled advocacy in general, that it's very white, right? Like the people who get the most stuff done in disability advocacy do so because they don't experience medical racism. They don't experience those compounded oppressions. And being able to have that solidarity with a community that is especially vulnerable to the global crisis, like Black and Brown disabled people are much more likely to die of this virus than anybody else. And that's because of systemic oppression, and really seeing that community solidarity that hasn't really been seen in a really long time on UCLA's campus was the key to our success. I genuinely believe 100% that the Disabled Student Union would not have been able to do what we have done in the past several months if it wasn't for, you know, Simone reaching out and being like, hey, I want to do this with you all. We've been working at this for decades, or Breeze, or, you know, any of the other amazing students of color who have been in solidarity, coalition, and leadership with us. And us presenting as a united front to a racist, ableist, classist administration, sticking it to them, sleeping in front of their doors, plastering their walls with UCLA doesn't care about Black students, UCLA doesn't care about disabled students, showing them that marginalized students will no longer be divided and then conquered. That was the key to our movement. And I really hope that that intersectionality spreads not only within the UCLA community and further advocacy, but hopefully in the country as the rest of the movement is spreading. So I really do think it's the key to our success.
Great. I'm very glad that you guys have united, because you're seeing that there's students of different races and students of different ethnicities that are experiencing harassment and experiencing racism throughout the campus as well. So I think to fight for your cause, to for disabled students, which is absolutely very important, is very, very crucial, as well as fighting for other causes of other people on campus as well. So I definitely commend you guys for that. Can you describe the strike for our safety? What was that like for you guys?
Yeah, sure. So that was kind of the organizing I was talking about a few minutes ago, where the USAC, which is the Undergraduate Students Association Council, or our student body, and the Mother Organizations Coalition, or MOs, I'll call for short. We basically had a meeting a week before we were set to come back in person on Monday, January 31st, and we planned originally just a strike. So it would be, none of us are going to show up to our in-person classes that Monday. We're going to do a picket line on UCLA's campus and basically make a bunch of signs, advocate, yell really loud, make this really big, hopefully get, news sources to report on us. And the day of, we made a picket line across Bruin Plaza, which is the center of UCLA's campus. And after advocating and really making our presence known for 3 hours in that area, we decided to march to Murphy Hall, which is where all the administrative offices are. And we had a little demonstration out there. We put it on Instagram Live. We made sure there were people who couldn't attend in person, because a lot of that is what we were fighting for. They had options to participate virtually over Zoom. Like I said, doing virtual actions like bombing UCLA's emails and social media with, why aren't you doing anything about this? Advocate for students, messaging their professors and their departments. Hey, you need to do hybrid. Hey, you need to pay more attention to students of color, et cetera. And in that moment, at about noon that day, when we went up to the second floor of Murphy Hall and started yelling and making so much noise outside of the chancellor's offices, we realized nobody is here. All of the chancellors were working remotely. And in that moment, we were like, we're not leaving this hallway until the demands we've laid out are met. And that impromptu decision by 10 or 12 organizers that day really it turned from a strike into a sit-in demonstration. And we were luckily granted an after-hours meeting with a few administrators that evening on that Monday. Their hope was, okay, now are you going to leave now that you got a meeting with the administration? But at the end of that meeting, it was so satisfying seeing Breeze go, okay, well, thanks, but we're going to stay here until we meet with the chancellor to get stuff actually done. And that meeting was set to happen on Friday. So first week, had the meeting with the chancellor. That didn't go ideally. We stayed for another week until the next Friday, when he said he would get back to us. Then our things weren't completely met. Luckily, the Vice Chancellor Monroe Gordon of Student Affairs had a huge meeting with us on Saturday after that. I forget exactly which date. It's probably like around the 11th of February, whatever that date is. And he spent 5 hours with us, basically being like, I don't want my students to be sleeping here to make sure that these things get done. Like, you deserve everything that I can give you. The Black Bruin Resource Center deserves the funds and the projects that you're asking for. The Mother Organizations Coalition deserves to feel safe doing what they want to do and building their communities. And they deserve to be retained and not, have a significantly longer time at UCLA to even finish school. And of course, disabled students deserve being able to learn safely. And he gave us all that he could, and that was about 90% of our demands. But by the Tuesday, which was 15 days of sleeping in Murphy Hall, going through these meetings, building that community, making a lot of noise, we learned that the last of our demands could only be met by the Academic Senate, which is a body of mostly faculty at UCLA. I think there's one at every UC, and there's a UC system-wide one. And they're basically make decisions about modality and whether or not what the nature of instruction is, and they have pretty complete power over that. And when we learned that, we had a meeting with them. Luckily, we were granted a meeting with some pretty nice people from the Academic Senate. Our experiences with them in the past were with the chair, and she was not nice to us and was caught speaking bad about us behind our backs, actually, stating, we don't take the Disabled Student Union seriously. These people don't know what they're talking about, stuff like that. So I'm glad they at least gave us respectful and nice people from the Academic Senate to speak to during that meeting. But after that meeting, we decided it's no longer strategic for us to be in this hallway. It's been 2.5 weeks. We know that it's now in this body's hand, and between you and me and everybody who's watching this, they are remote and they work remotely. So us being in that physical space was no longer something that we really needed to push this forward like we had with all the other meetings. So on February 16th, we decided after that meeting, we're going to allow them 2 weeks to get back to us. That date is Monday, the February 28th. I don't know when this is going to be posted, but they said, we're going to get back to you with our latest negotiations on Monday, February 28th, including, why it's impossible for us to provide hybrid learning. And we're going to go from there. And we decided on February 16th to vacate after the longest sit-in UCLA's history. So it was truly a historic moment. And like I said, and like you mentioned with that intersectionality, that made it even more historic that so many groups came together. So it was really a more than 2-week demonstration of student power and intersectional student power, and that when none of us shut up and when we all fight together and refuse to leave until what we need is met, things get done. So I'm really hoping that the response that they give on Monday is sufficient, but if it doesn't happen, we are planning to go to the UC-wide level, the Academic Freedom Council on the UC-wide level. And if that doesn't work, if conversations with the president of the UC system doesn't work, if negotiating with the faculty association and the lecturers union and other faculty doesn't work, we are completely willing to gather up all of the 30, 40, movements that are happening across the country, UCI at Pomona, UC Davis, UC Berkeley, all of these other colleges, some on the East Coast as well. And we are totally on board with suing the university for our access and making sure that hybrid learning is truly what can be provided to us, and making sure that we can get that access, not just during this global crisis, but into the years in the future. So no disabled student and no student in general has to feel fear or that they are going to fail university because they can't come in person.
Yes, and I would also, like to add in, basically because this is not, just this UCLA fight. It's actually been somewhat of a fight going across, at least within also within the UC system, because what you're mainly hearing is about the story of just one front. Let me explain about what is going on within the other fronts, because within the same week that UCLA actually, did their 16, which later became their day one strike, which later became a 16-day strike, UCI and UC Davis both collectively also did their strikes within the same week, specifically within Wednesday that same week. And we basically, were able to held our protest, which is like around like the flagpole area, which in case you know is kind of like an open forum. We mainly got ourselves some moderate attendance, and it was mainly a bit of a success that we're able to get the voice out there. We were able to reach out, to at least campus press. And essentially what we did in the meantime right now is essentially we're doing more of behind the scenes work in Irvine. Sure, there are talks right now of maybe doing another walkout to at least help boost our, our movement and at least get our voice out there. But in the meantime, we've mainly been doing stuff like we've been mainly producing like social media posts within our within our Instagram account, and mainly spreading around social media throughout the UCI to at least address our concerns among the student body. We have also, done things like we have also created like email templates to at least send out to admin and also faculty to at least join our cause and also to hear our concerns and at least to do something about it. We have also entered, town halls essentially to address our question, to at least question the administration and basically get them to push for further action. Though I would admit that there has been a sense of, how do I put this, censorship, or at least a sense of just shifting the question along, or at least shifting the blame, at least to explain why they're not willing to commit this, which is a bit interesting because, UCI also has the capacity with the resources and the funding to at least garner universal access. And essentially that's what we've been doing within, the meantime. And also an interesting thing also about Resist UCI, which is essentially the similar movement with, what you hear about DSU, UCLA, is that, we're essentially more of like a makeshift movement that was created out of this outrage. And essentially we are willing to fight for the long term.
Okay. So what demands were met when you have met with the chancellor of the school?
Yeah, so on the disabled student union side, we basically got half of what we needed met. So The first thing that we got met, which is unrelated to hybrid learning, is the chancellor is going to write a letter of support in support of the Lily Shaw Disability Cultural Center. Lily Shaw is unfortunately passed away in 2020, and she's one of the founders of the Disabled Student Union, getting a space where disabled students can really have that community and start to build that community on campus. The second thing that was promised is the vice chancellor is going to investigate in the next few weeks how to make sure that all online resources, lectures, recordings, stuff like that have accurate ADA compliant captioning. Right now, a lot of lectures don't have any captioning at all. So in the meantime, he's going to send out guidance to faculty on how to turn on auto captioning on Zoom, how to turn it on through our recorded lectures in Canvas that we're using. And then, what was the, oh my goodness. Oh yeah, and the third thing is he's going to commit to hiring 4 to 5 more specialists for the Center for Accessible Education so that the accommodations process can hopefully be a little smoother and a little quicker for students. And he's also hiring an ADA compliance officer, which we have not had for quite some time now, and it's going to be hired under the Title IX, under the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office with the Title IX officer, rather than under Student Affairs, which it was incorrectly housed in. But the things that have not been met yet are mandated recordings of lectures, live streaming of lectures, and getting rid of punitive attendance requirements. Things like your grade gets docked every time you don't show up to class in person, or you have to write a 5-page paper for every reading that you missed. On the other side, with the Mother Organizations Coalition, the ASU, and the Black, excuse me, what was the official name? The Black Student no.
Black
so
Student Athlete Alliance.
There we go. Yeah, the Black Student Athlete Alliance, and sorry, I didn't want to missay their name, and also the Pacific Island Student Association and the American Indian Students Association. They were promised a variety of things, including trying to mitigate issues with the Community Programs Office, which has unfortunately created a very toxic and uncomfortable environment in their offices, and harassment of students has taken place, and a lot of students have moved out of their centers in order to feel comfortable in their community because of this institutional presence that is within their spaces. I can send a link that you can share with a list of all of their demands because I don't want to misconstrue anything. But the things that I do know off the top of my head is the African Student Union secured permanent funding for the Black Student Use, the Black Bruin Resource Center, which they hadn't had before. They're working out how to have that funding done in the next few weeks. The Pacific Islands students are getting a recruiter for the first time. They have a really small population that hasn't increased in a really long time. The American Indian Students Association is also going to get more resources and meetings with the chancellor on how to increase Native students on campus and to rename the Jan steps to the Curavanga steps, which is honoring the tribes that traditionally hold UCLA's land. And the Mother Organizations Coalition is basically getting a lot of reform in how their system is being run. So I will send you a link to all of those demands that have been met. We made a post about it today, but that's a brief summary of some things that were met. And regardless of what the terminology is, everyone is really excited. We would say about 95% of the things we asked for were met, except for those 3 things that I mentioned for the Disabled Student Union. So yeah, a lot has gotten done, which has been pretty amazing.
Great. That's always great to always have things done when you're pushing and demanding what you need. Absolutely. So what are your future plans for the Disabled Student Union?
Yeah, so in general, over the next few months, we're going to figure out how to get more of a system in place for the Disabled Student Union. Like I said, at this point, everyone's kind of on the same level and there isn't a lot of internal organization. We're planning on how to create a system that is a little more organized. It's a little easier to do advocacy in the future because we can potentially have committees or have leaders of certain committees, like, who's going to be in charge of our social media, simple stuff like that, and really making sure that we're strong internally so that we can show strong externally. And then in terms of advocacy, like I said, we're going to be reaching out to the UC-wide level very soon, and we're going to be having conversations with lawyers from Disability Rights California and Disability Rights Advocates over the next few weeks and how to proceed if a lawsuit were to be our final straw. And yeah, it's really going to be a slow burn, at least for the next few weeks and the next few months, and trying to figure out the best plan of action to either get to the academic senate or get above the academic senate to get this done. So that's it for the Disabled Student Union, at least in the short term. And if anyone else from your organizations want to talk about your next steps, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to also add dealing with the other thing that we are working on is there has been implications that mask mandates will end at the start of spring quarter. Like,
I blocked that out of my memory already. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that already.
See, I'm actually teaching against spring quarter, so this like matters to me. Not that none of it else matters, but mainly seeing like my lab mates every day at work is fine. But like with mask mandates ending almost everywhere, which makes me not comfy at all, especially as someone who has gotten colds that have led to post-asthmatic symptoms after them during when we were wearing masks. Yeah, I'm a little bit scared of getting the virus. I'm not like technically immunocompromised, but yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. So yeah, I think the other thing besides working up the academic senate chain of command is trying to urge for mask mandates to stay in place in classrooms and lecture halls.
Right, just kind of jumping off that. So like at Pomona, so I am immunocompromised. So this is something that is like pretty, personal to me, but also like, let's just put it out there that like, you don't have to be immunocompromised to be scared about long COVID. You don't have to be immunocompromised to be worried about like the impact of on your various body systems. So it's not just immunocompromised students. But I will say that like I know that one of the colleges of the Claremont Consortium, which is a group of like of colleges that Pomona is a part of, one of them is voting right now to remove masks on campus, and we are afraid that high-risk students, but really all students should be concerned about this because all students are at risk for long COVID, are nervous about that being repealed, because if that's repealed, then maybe the other colleges within the consortium will follow suit, and that that's a real risk to students, not only in their like physical safety, but also in their educations. Students shouldn't need to worry about their physical health while they're trying to learn or take notes. And yeah, you can go to our Instagram, which is at Claremont DISCOVR, and there's a survey up for Pitzer College, where you can just fill out a survey and put a 1 by the option that says, 1 being most preferred, by the option that says we need to keep masks on campus, we need to be cautious about this, and then write a little comment saying in support of vulnerable students, or talk about your fear about COVID, or just like wanting to help other students like have a good educational experience. So this is really something that is spreading to other colleges, and is one of the greatest concerns, I would say, at the moment, the mask requirement being repealed.
Yeah, and I would also, to jump in to at least a comment about the future of what we're doing here in Resist UCI, which is, which, as I mentioned earlier, is essentially, our sort of like disability student union, but it's more like a grassroots movement that was created out of outrage, of the universities, what we believe are their ineffective measures to at least contain, COVID-19, and also their measures of how they're at least treating, the pandemic. Because essentially, I think that we're also in a process of at least instituting some sort of reforms within, within a movement, within Resist UCI. Essentially, there's have been, like I said, to mention, there's also been, talks of potentially, like maybe doing like another walkout. But also another thing also to mention is that perhaps like a sense of organization, like a similar situation of UCLA, because the structure of Resist UCI essentially is that it's more like a grassroots movement. Essentially, it has like a sense of semi-autonomy with members just doing their own thing, but perhaps there could be a sense of greater cohesion. And also further actions that also seems to be going on with Resist UCI Resist UCI is that essentially we're also doing like we're essentially doing we are doing things like for going into at least try to at least go to town halls within the university to at least address our concerns, and also things like essentially the usual stuff like us making more posts and essentially per post to at least share and spread, and to the point that we even have like a meme page to at least address the concerns and also what's going on within UCI and also largely within the larger UC system. And another thing I also like to mention is that it's also about the mask thing, because there was a sense, because now there's a sense of outrage within UCI over the mask. It's even to the point that now because you see for a while we have actually done petitions about this, and we even made ourselves like a new petition to at least spread, and also a few email templates to at least send to at least professors and faculty to at least share our concerns about this. And also another thing we also been working on is also within the diplomatic front to at least strengthen our ties within other universities to at least have a better sense of cohesion if we're going to, if Resist UCI wishes to at least do this within the long term. And yeah, I also recommend, if you want to look at further actions, I recommend going to our Instagram and Twitter page at resist @resist_UCI. Remember, that's @resist_UCI. And I would also like to say that UCI would also well, when push comes to shove, UCI would be willing to at least participate within this lawsuit, and we hope to at least get further, involved if the situation were to come.
Did you face any kind of resistance from other students and the faculty? And what was that like, and how did you overcome that?
At least on the UCLA side, a lot of the resistance was very anti-Black and very anti the intersectionality of our movement. A lot of the criticism was, what DSU is doing is fine, but why is everyone else trying to co-opt their movement and get what they need out of this? And that is just very clearly everyone who's not, the other people in the movement are students of color. So I wonder who you're targeting in that statement. And we made it very clear that if you are going to support the Disabled Student Union, we don't want it unless you are supporting everyone else that we were in coalition with. And luckily, we didn't really have any like physical altercations with other students. There were threats, I don't know if you've heard, not related to the sit-in specifically, but of a white supremacist rally that was to occur during our sit-in on UCLA's campus, as well as a Turning Point USA rally that was to happen in front of Murphy Hall. Although very luckily that did not reach us and students were not in danger from us. There were presence from police, at least especially in the latter half of our sit-in. Sheriffs coming in basically early hours of the morning to question why we're here, UCPD officers coming in earlier in the morning, flashing flashlights in students' faces and basically counting the number of students that were there for whatever purposes they wanted, police officers harassing students saying, have fun until closing time when students were walking into Murphy Hall, profiling students of color who were walking around at night on campus who were from the sit-in several times. So although we didn't get much literal resistance from students, there was presence from law enforcement that attempted to intimidate us and get us to leave. And luckily, every time that there was a threat, we were able to get 50 to 100 students to come out and basically say, you want to kick us out at 5? Try now. And that was able to be a huge barrier of protection, especially for those of us that would be most vulnerable to police violence. And we were very lucky to have that community and that support to make sure that nothing did happen. On the faculty side, we haven't heard really any express like, I hate this idea from the faculty, but there has been a lot of hesitancy. And that makes sense. Like, this is a new thing. You're going to have to learn how to use new technology in new ways. So we get it. So part of the way we're going to proceed in the next few weeks is reaching out to the Faculty Association and the Lecturers Union through the UC system and basically teaching faculty, hey, these are ways that we can do things and make hybrid a possibility without you being overburdened as a faculty member, because we know the life as a professor isn't always peachy, right? So really reaching out to faculty and making sure that they know, we know your concerns. And this is really for the benefit of all education. And it's us, you and faculty and students against an administration who won't provide us the resources to make this stuff happen. So really building that coalition amongst all different types of people at UCLA has been really important. And that community has been great so far.
Yeah, excellent. I just want to add something that kind of caught my attention because Academic Senate, which is not super representative, lecturers can't vote on it. It's kind of a closed circuit. They've been saying, oh, this hybrid stuff would be against academic freedom, and meanwhile have an organization called Faculty Association / Association of American University Professors, and the Association of American University Professors are basically like the experts on academic freedom. They literally kind of wrote the book on it back in the early 1900s, like developed the whole concept, and they have a blog at UCLA, and they talked about when we reached our agreement, and they did not say, you know, if you do hybrid, that'd be bad for academic freedom. They just said, hey, we're kind of going to need more equipment, otherwise we won't be able to do hybrid, but they didn't say that the concept would actually hurt academic freedom, which sounds like something that would be all on top of if it was true. So I feel like the amount of opposition that is put up by certain people in academic senate is much less reflective of like the broader faculty approach than they would like to say.
I would also, like to comment about for also what's going on, in UCI is that fortunately for UCI, we did not receive as much hate nor backlash as, and say UCLA. Although to be fair, that's mainly because, as I mentioned earlier, that we are more of a behind the scenes group. We mainly do stuff more online. However, I would say that we did face some opposition during our protest I remember on that Wednesday day, because what mainly happened was that that when we actually were holding our protest, there was at least some campus, like security, there was some police. It was more or less kind of like a bit of a standoff to at least, I guess they were just waiting for us to at least, I guess, to make an excuse to see if we were willing to at least, I don't know, say like riot or anything, or find any excuse to at least shut us down. But fortunately, we were able to at least stand our line, and that we were able to show that we were peaceful and that there was no reason to at least further need for further escalation. And so that was at least good despite their intimidation. And however, one thing I did remember that I heard from my fellow colleagues within from at least from the group at UCI is that essentially there were reports of at least of pro white supremacist stickers being posted all over the campus. That was essentially something that kind of terrified us. And sure, that was something that's been going on for some time, but lately it seemed to have increased, and and there was a sense of outrage that the university hasn't been doing much to at least stamp out this. So essentially that is what's going on, at UCI so far, and that, further developments might happen later in the future, depending on how, how things are going on within the movement at UCI and how far we're able to go to at least accomplish our goals. But this is essentially what's happening right now, and hopefully escalation doesn't go further from there.
Okay. And were you able to was UCI able to meet some of your demands, and if not, what are other courses of action do you plan to take?
Well, I would say that because listen, we actually had ourselves, demand, but our main demand that we were basically pushing for, and that the reason why the movement was created in the first place, was essentially for universal access. We were mainly, just pushing for the idea that, if you are a student within UCI, then essentially you can just appeal, for universal access, no questions asked, and essentially you can, essentially that you can get yourself like a completely online or a hybrid option, and you don't have to at least apply for anything. You just have to request for that, and it'll be automatically be granted for you, because that is something that UCI doesn't usually provide. Or at the very least, it just depends on what type of, like courses or majors, or at least different type of schools within the university that you're at least going to take on how much. And we simply just want a universal access where any student from any major can simply just, if they want like a completely online or at least a hybrid class, they can at least get that, no questions asked. That's essentially what we're pushing for. And essentially the action for that going on for some time is that we are simply still trying to at least push the university to at least to go for that. They're at least, willing, to listen. It's just that it's going to at least take some time to at least work with the university, at least willing to, and for the university willing to negotiate with us. I think that perhaps like maybe Minor said, is that what Resist UCI could do in the future is perhaps push for maybe for action. Perhaps we could push for more protests, perhaps to at least align ourselves with other universities that at least completed similar actions, to at least learn from them, and at least maybe they could at least assist us. But so far I would comment that essentially what's going on in UCI is essentially it's kind of like at this point like a stalemate. Like essentially we are just basically wanting to at least push for this, but we are still, waiting. And but hopefully, because of the whole mask thing, there will at least be a new set of outrage, and thus as a result, we can at least increase our demands, and that the outrage can at least give us new leverage, and that hopefully that can at least breathe new life into the movement. So that is at least what's going on within UCI so far.
And what about Pomona? What actions have you been taking with Pomona, and have some of the demands been met on your end?
Yeah, so absolutely. So this is a relatively new movement. We have a petition with just like for a little bit of context, the Claremont colleges are only about like 6,000 to 8,000 students, and we got a petition signed by over 1,200 students. So we've had a big proportion of the population, student population, sign the petition. We've gotten responses from the admin, but we still haven't had any substantive steps being taken towards hybrid learning yet. Although there is one college which is considering a hybrid accommodation, so maybe that could happen. Although I will say that that I don't think that I just learned the other day that Pomona is going to retain masks for the rest of this semester. And I honestly don't think that that they would have done that without our pressure, and without disabled students standing up and saying, this is our health, these are our livelihoods. And having that pressure from on the admin to talk about this. So this is about hybrid access, and we need to keep fighting for it. But it's also when we fight for hybrid access, we're actually also making a comment on a lot of other policies, and masks are one of them. And frankly, we're in this movement for the long haul, and I'm really happy that we've been able to get this student support and also have the admin, at least sort of recognize our existence, which is much more than has been done in the past.
And can you describe hybrid access in detail?
Yeah, sure. Well, so what we're like, I guess the technical term is a dual modality, which is basically professors will be can have the choice to provide be that like a recording of a class, be that like live stream into a class using like Zoom or other existing infrastructure. And it basically just allows students who don't feel comfortable coming to class during a global pandemic and don't feel like they should have to risk their health to access that class remotely and access their educations remotely. So that's what hybrid access is.
So what are your long-term goals for the accessibilities for disabled students in your respective schools?
That's a big question. Obviously, like the most ideal thing would be universal access physically and in remote instances. But I think the scholar Rosemary Garland Thompson, who's actually a visiting professor from Emory and taught a bioethics class at UCLA last quarter, when we had a conversation with her about this movement, we were like, you know, this UCLA is so messed up that it's like this. And she told us, like, she's, you know, in her later years, and she was like, I want you to know that it's not just UCLA, it's everywhere. And this is a product of systemic oppression. And that's why, you know, it's so difficult to change things on your campuses. So at least in the next few years, I truly, truly hope that UCLA is going to commit a large portion of their funds to at least invest in making sure that every classroom has the capability of providing that dual modality, providing some sort of recording or technology, recording or live streaming technology, so that professors don't have to do some like weird setup with a Zoom computer at the front of their lecture that's not super official and can't be captioned correctly. I hope in the next 5 years that that initiative will be done and all of that will be installed. In the next decades, in the next 100 years, who knows, UCLA has been, you know, a university since 1919. I really hope that disabled voices continue to be heard and that there are more disabled people as a part of administrations, and there are more disabled faculty that are a part of things like the academic senate. There are none on the academic senate right now, a part of the disability studies, or who are disabled themselves, and really making sure that in this society that should ultimately be deconstructed and then rebuilt in an image that does not have those systems in place. In the meantime, really making sure that disabled voices are heard and that accessibility is not seen as, oh, this is a flowery thing that we can put on our brochures. It's something that our students really need in order to stay in higher education. And it's on the physical or on the virtual side, it needs to be prioritized. And even just on the physical side, for an example of how inaccessible UCLA could be, it's impossible to get from the dorms to the other side of campus without going up at least 100 stairs. That is impossible to avoid those 100 stairs. And that is really a metaphor for how inaccessible higher education is on the basis of disability, but on the basis of class, on the basis of race, on the basis of ethnicity, documentation status, socioeconomic status. And those things ultimately will take a long time to be deconstructed, but I really hope that disabled voices are going to be a big part of that, and that accessibility in all activism that happens on campus is going to be prioritized.
Yeah, just like kind of jump off of that. I mean, Chris has mentioned like accessibility goes outside of the classroom too. And one point that I really need to mention, and I think is something that we should really focus on, is how throughout the country, student health centers are severely like defunded, and they do not have the resource. In general, they do not have the resources for students. It is so difficult to be able to keep up with doctor's appointments. My school, they don't allow cars for first and second years, but they don't give you any way to get to your doctor's appointment. So I last semester I wasn't able to have a car to get to my doctor's. Wasn't allowed to have a car to get to my doctor's appointment, and I had to, as someone with an invisible illness, I had to like out myself to friends that I was having these health problems, and that is a very vulnerable thing to say. I personally think that no matter, if you know someone who has a car or not, you should be able to get to that appointment. And not to mention, like throughout the country, there are people without, there are student health centers without even basic staffing issues. There's I think 2 doctors for a campus that serves like 8,000 students. So that's a ratio of one doctor to 4,000 students. And it's just across the board, very inaccessible.
I would also, to jump on, also for UCI, because essentially, one thing, was that we're hoping for is that, we also agree with very similar demands, at least for UCLA, that we hope that universal access will at least become will basically become like a guaranteed a promise for at least students that go in, to UCI. And that we also hope for another thing is that we also hope that at least, from admin, we at least get a sense of increase transparency regarding issues that concern, immunocompromised, disabled, and also, people of color, because what the decision that admin basically did was essentially just it's just irreprehensible, like this shouldn't normally happen, especially, within a UC. And another thing also like to comment within, the grand scale of things is, of course, regarding status of disability student unions, in that mainly they usually is that what I've noticed is that they usually tend to go ignored, in that they usually don't tend to have a sense of bit of an impact, or don't have much of a say within university politics. And so one thing I also hope for is at least with the national scale, at least in disability student unions, at least gain a sense of, at least a sense of voice, but at least that the voice of disability student unions are able to at least be reached out within student government, within the student governments that are at least willing to have access to at least reach out to, admin. And also hopefully within the long term, that if the movement goes successful within UCI, is that perhaps Resist UCI might potentially become our official disabled student union, or at the very least, an offshoot of Resist UCI could become the UCI Disabled Student Union, because this appears to be a very recent phenomenon. And sure, UCI isn't as old as UCLA, or possibly even, much, or even Pomona, or possibly much of the Claremont colleges. But what I hope is that UCI will one day, become a bit of a hotbed, essentially of disability rights all over, just over, not just within the UC system, but possibly, all over the country, if we're willing to at least commit to the fight. But that will only happen if the fight were to still continue among people who at least advocate for the disabled within UCI. And that is at least what hoping for, is that, there's at least we commit to the fight, and that hopefully, we strengthen our ties, with our allies, and to at least come up to a collective, union to at least push for this, within UC, within Claremont, and, also beyond.
So would you say that another long-term goal would be to mobilize disability student organizations across the country?
Absolutely. We actually are building a Discord group that has representatives from 30 to 40 disability, not necessarily just disabled student unions, but any disability organizations across the country. And just having that hub of all of these students that can pick up at a moment's notice and be like, hey, we're going to fight with you. Building that coalition is super important. And I hope that disabled student unions become just as widespread as, LGBT centers or, Black student unions across the country, that we can, match that mobilization, and which obviously came with a lot of hard work that we're going to have to go through ourselves, and really hoping fingers crossed that happens. And I also did want to comment on what Johnny said too about funding. Is at least in the UC system, I believe it's less than 1% of the UC budget. I think it's maybe less than 0.5% of the UC budget goes to disability services across the UC system. And I believe it's 1 to 2% of the UC budget goes to UCPD and policing. And recently they've gotten increases such as militarization and access to drones and surveillance of students. And the fact that disabled students are prioritized less than a force that has dehumanized students for decades and continues to is indicative of all the change that needs to happen on these campuses. And I hope that can happen. Go ahead, Eliana.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's actually Kenneth Mejia, who's running to be the city comptroller, top accountant, basically in charge of making sure politicians don't steal our money. Great guy, vote for him. But anyhow, he ran over the UC budget, and it's 0.4% that is going for disability services, which says a lot. And also just in terms of general priorities, there's like toxicology tests for students, especially women who might have had something put in their drink to assault them. Those are not available. There's a lot of things that could go into the safety and health of students. The wait time at the Center for the Psychological, the Center for like mental health and therapy is a few months. So there are a lot of things that are necessary to the health and the safety of students that seem to go on a back burner.
I would also, like to add in, within here in UCI, we have also expanded, within our diplomatic, front. We were able to at least secure. So the current ties, at least what's going on within UCI, we were able to secure ties, with the Claremont colleges. We were able to secure ties with UCLA, also with Cal State Northridge, UC Davis, and also they also been involved in efforts to at least secure ties within UC Berkeley. And also, I'm also lucky that at least UCLA was at least nice for to at least invite UCI to at least their wider network to at least help us strengthen the coalition. And also we're also working is also to strengthen ties of our allies, because it's at least good to know that UCLA at least is one of our strongest allies. In fact, I think that they're one of our first allies that UCI has done throughout this whole movement, and that we are more than happy to at least continue our collaboration with UCLA within the future. And we have also secured ties, like I said earlier, also with the Claremont colleges, and that essentially they're also willing to at least work with us. And also another thing I'd like to add is that also from what I heard from my colleagues is that essentially we also have people reaching out to us, like essentially have people reaching us from other UCs. We have people reaching out from Cal State Northridge, and even from Northwestern, apparently, because it shows that that if we want to at least secure this movement, because this can't just be a university-wide thing, because essentially to fight for since with the UC system, because if you just have one UC school to at least try to combat not just our school but also the UC system, they'd be crushed in an instant. But if they're at least willing, but if different UCs are willing to at least work together, and also reach out to allies that are also from different different university systems, and also from different like universities both public and private, not just within California but also across the country, then we would be more stronger. It'll be more affordable. At least if one crush and then another can just pop up, and can just continue the never-ending cycle of resistance until much of our collective demands can also be met. And it's also important that we also have to acknowledge, at least with the budget, because, the UC system can easily, provide all of this. They can easily provide, like universal access. They can at least, provide, like universal access, for instance. But they just don't want to, because, because for some reason they tend to be very sensitive with their money. And I suspect that they usually spend the money, places like policing, or just increase the salary of their chancellors. And that essentially we also need a lot of reform also within the budgeting of the UC system, and possibly, maybe advocate for an audit. But it's going to be a very tricky fight. It's going to be a very long fight. And we have to at least commit not just for the short term, but also for the long haul if we want any change made.
I want to add a separate kind of, a little bit of a tangent on the importance of coalition building outside of just your own university into other universities, is that the access needs provided and the knowledge base of what access needs are actually available can differ between universities. And so sometimes the knowledge base isn't there. And I know a lot of times when you're thinking I think when most people imagine universal access of things, they're thinking in the lecture-based space. But there's a lot of work that is not really shown or not really advertised or shown of like virtual access in lab spaces that is more than just like watching a video. And yes, watching a video was good for the, let's say, March 2020, when we had no idea what we were going to do. But there is technology out there. And I was very grateful to, I think, the American Chemical Society last year. I got to see some talks on it, and it's really impressive. I'm a lab chemist. It's hard to say that it is quite as good, but I think supporting the access of people is way more important and trying to get even closer to that experience is way more important than just shutting people out of these spaces. Because there are some like you can't get a chemistry degree without lab classes.
I also, like to add in, to your claim, because yes, I understand that, collaboration, with other universities, isn't easy, especially if you have like a different interpretation of roughly the same demands. But here's the thing, like this isn't an easy road to take. It isn't easy, to at least get a bunch of, different universities with different, with different values, with different university culture, or at least with different, mentalities on how to pursue, the same issue. It's not going to be easy. There's going, I recommend that, that potentially there might become the time that we may have to have like, like conferences, attending from different universities to at least discuss on a set of minimal, at least definitions on what do we at least want, and perhaps to at least have further, like negotiations, further talks, at least with different universities, and have a sense of increased collaboration, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a while, but we're simply within the early days, And so it's best that we at least discuss these issues, now than until later when this can potentially lead to gridlock and potentially lead to, creative differences, and can lead to a lot of infighting that could potentially tear the movement apart. So it's best that we at least discuss now until later, and at least acknowledge that this is going to be a long challenge ahead of us, and that we at least need to prepare for the expectations of at least having wide coalitions. Just want to add.
Thank you, Frank. I remember Bernice Reagan Johnson, who's a civil rights activist and a singer, said if you're in a coalition and you're comfortable, it's not a big enough coalition. So there's really beautiful moments in coalition politics. I remember our student body president, Breeze Velasquez, was cooking for us, and that was beautiful. There's been a lot of beautiful moments, but the point of a coalition, like Frank said, isn't only the comfort or the ease of it, but the strength and being committed to the movement and building it up. So it is strong enough to make things change. So I think the rule, if you're not sure, should I join this coalition? Should I try and expand? Should I make this uncomfortable outreach or raise this issue so that it doesn't tear us apart? Then I think the answer is, if you're not sure and it's not a situation of abuse, but just of difference, then I think the answer is just like, go for it and realize that this is a lot of work. Sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it hurts, but the point is that if you're dissatisfied with the way the world is and the way your university is and the way that you and other people are treated, then you keep at it, and over time things change.
Absolutely. Is there anything more that you want to add? Anything more that you would like to say? And what would you say to the administration and the chancellors of your respective schools?
Since I don't think we've shouted it out yet, if you want to follow the DSU at UCLA, or follow along with what we're doing, or contact us to start your own DSU or to join DSU if you're at the UCLA, our handle is DSU UCLA on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And that is the same for our email as well. So dsuucla@gmail.com. And in terms of what I would want to say to the chancellors and the administration, I first want to thank Vice Chancellor Monroe Gordon of Student Affairs for really taking the brunt of this for us and having those long, uncomfortable meetings with students who are angry and upset and exhausted, and getting us everything that he possibly can get us. And to everyone else who has been stonewalling us, who has been drawing this out for months and months and months, we are coming for you. To be very plain about it, despite how tired we may feel now, or if you think we are beat down now, we are 1,000 times stronger than you think that we are. And the fact that we were able to get this out of you with just 2 weeks of this strong advocacy shows that student power is alive and well. And these coalitions that we are building and this movement that we are building will only get bigger. And a way to avoid all of this mess with your students doing all of this to get what they need. Just give us what we need. That is really all that we're doing. This is not for publicity. This is not for popularity. This is not for our own political campaigns, anything like that. This is truly because we need this access to survive and thrive at your university. And that access that has been given to the white, rich, cishet, non-disabled people at your university since the early 1900s, some universities since the 1800s, that should be afforded to everyone, and everyone should have that opportunity, because as we know, a college degree is a privilege that makes sure that we can succeed later in life. So if there is a chancellor, an administrator, hell, even a superintendent at a high school watching this, know that you have the power to make the lives of your students and your faculty better. Give us those resources, and that truly, if you do them, all of the advancement at your university is going to get better. So that's the advice and the words I would give to them.
I, would like to say, if I'm here in UCI, that if any, students here are watching or at least listening to this and are also very interested in at least reaching out, to UCI, or willing to, with UCI, either for collaboration or at least, for potential alliances, or at least to hear from us on how to at least form your own DSU or strengthen your own DSU, then I recommend reaching out to our Instagram and Twitter at resist_UCI. Remember, that's at resist_UCI. And anyway, about the issue of chancellors. So what we hope to at least hear, what I hope out from our chancellors, is that we essentially hope for an increase, for in the future, an increased sense of transparency, hope to at least especially with issues regarding, in the pandemic that might affect people of disabilities, the immunocompromised, and of course, people of color, specifically, aka people who are more likely to be affected by the pandemic. We also hope, for at the very least an apology, or at least a sense of acknowledgement of wrongdoing, of at least not consulting, student government regarding, COVID measures. And we hope to at least have an increased sense of transparency regarding and collaboration with student government on COVID measures within the near future. And we also hope that another thing also is that we at least have our voices heard, to at least have the opportunity for negotiation with, guys, the chancellors. We hope at least we are willing to at least negotiate and to at least fulfill, our demands, especially for universal access. And also, I'm also trying to remember like another thing. Okay, so essentially that's essentially what we at least hope for. And we also acknowledge that, yes, you guys, also for just not just here at UCI, but also for all chancellors, out there, that university chancellors, like, yeah, I understand that you guys, are at least unwilling to at least spend money, or at least think that, we're basically just a joke. Oh, we'll just fade away for some time, but essentially this is just a fad and everything will just go away. Well, let me tell you something, because throughout this whole pandemic, students all over the, from universities all over the country are basically outraged that we are essentially, angered by this. And we are willing to do anything we can to at least get our voices heard. And we are willing to at least negotiate. We are willing to compromise, but we want you to at least compromise. And for those, from high-end universities, we understand, like the UC system, for instance, or even like the Claremont colleges, for instance, we know you guys, have the budgets. We know you guys have the resources to at least take care of this situation, but you guys don't want to. I don't understand why you guys don't want to. But we need you to at least do this, because if you want to at least end the fighting, if you at least want to, get us to at least have us go home, because we are willing, to go home, but we're willing to do that if you're willing to listen to our demands, and you're willing, and not just listen, but to act on our demands. Because if our demands are met, then essentially have to deal with this problem anymore, and then we can simply just move on with our lives. That's essentially what I have so far.
Yeah, so I guess I can talk about Claremont. For us, I think what we want is something pretty simple, and that's some empathy. I think that students, I think that admin and the board of trustees need to try to put themselves in our shoes. Many of us have medical trauma. We've gone to, some of us have, been to the hospitals. Some of us have been to doctor's office. Others of us have had bad experiences not having their accessibility needs met. And having this pandemic hang over our heads, and having to need to walk through the classroom doors and think about all of those things, no student should have to go through that, and no student should have to feel that, especially when all we're trying to do is try and learn. So I think that the most important thing is that administrators and the board of trustees could do is just take a look in the mirror and try and see where we're coming from.
Absolutely. Finally, I just wanted to open the floor for you guys to say that, to say where people can follow you, where people can follow your organization. I know that Chris and Frank had, and Johnny, I believe, had set their social media handles for their organizations, but please do so again so that everybody will be able to follow you and get more information.
Sure. So to follow the DSU, Disabled Student Union at UCLA, it's DSU UCLA on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you want to follow me personally, I'm a disability and queer advocate. My Instagram handle is CPIKO art on Instagram. So hope to see you join our fight.
Great. For the Claremont schools, we on Instagram, we are CLAREMONT DISCOVR. So that's Claremont Discover, the disability group on campus. I also do some posts about disability. JELLSWRTH is my Instagram, but definitely just follow the Discover if that's the important stuff. And yeah, we do have a survey that everyone can fill out. That's really important for masks. So if everyone could do that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and also here in UCI, if anyone is actually out there willing to at least collab, reach out, or at least wants to hear from UCI on how to help start their movement, or at least help strengthen their movement, then I would recommend reaching out to resist @resist_UCI at Instagram and Twitter. Remember, that's @resist_UCI. It is RESIST_UCI. And there you'll basically find email templates, and you'll even find a few petitions that we are currently filling out, and also notifications on the current action, what's happening in UCI so far. And if anyone is at least willing to at least hear, I don't know, more from what I have to say about the movement, or any advice, how to at least help strengthen movement, or at least want to reach him out personally, then I recommend going to Instagram on @derperperson. That is @derperperson. That is @DERPERPERSON. Yes, I know. I made that as a joke many years ago, expecting that I would never use this. Well, look who's laughing now, Instagram.
Anyone else would like to share their social media handles so people can follow?
Sure. Joking, because I am one of the true millennials of the group. I use Twitter for most of my stuff, so I'm sorry, it's really long, HC Friedman, so FRIEDMAN, and then chem, like chemistry, so CHEM, I'll repeat it all together. So it's @HCFRIEDMANCHEM on Twitter. I mostly post about, I post a mix of science things, advocacy, especially advocacy within the sciences. So uplifting Black, queer, disabled organizations in STEM, to name a very narrow few. So, as well as just the research I do every once in a while. So.
You can also follow me on Twitter. I do tweet a lot about advocacy, but it is also a personal account. So a lot of just whatever is posted, but it's Mixie Battler. That's at MIXIEBATLER.
Eliana?
Hi, thank you very much. So my Twitter is Be Brave My Loves. That'd be BEBRAVEMYLOVES. And my Instagram, where I rarely post but do share some interesting stuff, is ELIANA1297. And also want to shout out National Disabled Law Students Association, which would be at NATDLSA on Twitter. So if you're interested in the legal education field and accessibility there. And UC Access now at Access UC, which is kind of like cross UC disability rights issues. So yeah, those are all cool things to check out. And yeah, looking forward to hearing from people.
Great, great. Well, that concludes our interview, unless anyone has anything else that they would like to add. Okay. Great.
Thank you so much, Rana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Absolutely. And have a great night. And I'm going to conclude recording for this evening. Thank you for watching. And please be sure to check out all the information that's in the description box below. And thank you all very much for joining, and be blessed.